Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I hope you are doing well. Thank you for coming back to my channel. Thank you for rejoining me for another installment, another video in this series of the path to becoming a UK barrister. Now, if this is your first video you're watching, I advise that you click out of this, just pause this video, open another tab, and start from the first video. So go back and watch the previous videos because they are actually a building block to this entire series. So I want you to, have your building blocks in place. So I would advise that you watch the first couple of videos. They basically cover choosing between the LLB and the GDL, and what does the second one cover? Tuition, applications, GDL providers. So all the first couple of videos have covered those topics. So you want to if you don't have any information on that, I would advise that you watch those first. But if you're good to go, that's fine. Let's stay here. So today's video is going to be about visa applications and GDL scholarships. So if you're a non-EU, I want to say non-Canadian and non-American, those are technically international, but I don't know for sure that they need visas. So that's US, North American citizens basically. But if you're non-EU from anywhere else, you will be needing a visa to study in the UK. So I'm going to talk to you through as much as I can on what that process is like, what to kind of expect to prepare you. I'll give you some pound figures, some money figures. You can convert them into your dollars, your yen, whatever it is, just to see, what kind of money you should be putting into, or you are going to be putting into this entire process. And then I will talk you through GDL scholarships, so opportunities to help you fund your GDL education, and also the BPTC. Actually, all those scholarships are available from mainly the same places. So that's what today's video will cover. Let's just get into it. Visa applications. Nobody likes visa applications. If you like the visa application process, then I guess your love for travel or exploring trumps the whole visa procedure of waiting and all of that. But probably some of you also cannot relate because you don't need visas for anything. That's also fine. But the visa process is, I think for a lot of people, can be a very terrifying process, especially when you're waiting to hear back. You do not need to be terrified. This is not thankfully, this visa to study in the UK is not a very complex process, but it is intense in that you cannot miss any crucial details. So the visa you need to study in the UK is called a Tier 4 visa. There are two types of Tier 4 visas. There's one for children, and there's one which is a general student. So if you're not a child, 18 and above, that's the visa that you would be applying for. How you start the process is basically you go on gov.uk, you type in Tier 4 visa, the application comes up. It gives you a little bit of a test to kind of figure out if you actually need a visa or not, and you go through the test, you choose the country you're from, all of that, and then it verifies if you need a visa, and it will then lay out for you on the website all the eligibility requirements, the process, the cost, all of those things. So that's pretty much it. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. Obviously, you want to apply as a student. If you're going to be applying for a student visa, you actually need to have an offer. So I would not start the application process until after I have an offer, or just, we move by faith. That's also fine. You can just start once you've actually put in your applications, you can start, but the application will stop you at a certain point because there's information that you require that you will not have until you have an offer and other pieces of documentation, which I'll talk about. So you can start your application when you have an offer, whether that's conditional or unconditional. However, at some stage your offer is going to, in order for you to be able to complete the application, you're going to need to have an unconditional offer, because there's information that you're going to require from your uni to put in the application, and they will only release that information when your offer is unconditional. Usually when you have a conditional university offer, what that means is, well, they want you, but there are certain conditions that you have to fulfill first before they can actually fully accept you. Usually what I find is people get conditional offers when there's still some outstanding parts of their application. So that for you might be your references have not been submitted yet, or it might be that you don't meet a certain entry requirement. So part of the requirements are your references, for example, your academics, being, you know, on top of your not your class but in your field, making sure that you have good grades, all of those things. What usually holds applications to conditional offers is either, again, like I said, references, or you're missing an entry requirement, and usually that might be an English requirement. So if you haven't done, if for any reason you need to show, an English requirement is always part of UK university applications. So if you haven't shown that you are able to speak fluently in English and communicate in English, you're going to have to take one of the international English tests. So that's either the IELTS or TOEFL, TOEFL, I think that's how it's spelled. So you're going to have to take one of those aptitude tests and get your grades back, your certificate back, before you can switch to an unconditional offer. So that's one of the things. It could be anything else. It could be that they haven't been able to convert your grades to the UK grading system. So that's something that I remember that I had to do, which is a pain, but the Canadian system is very different. Of marking is very different from the UK system. So I had to go through a bunch of grades, Google grade converters, and kind of ask the school what version of my grade they wanted, whether it was GPA, all of that. And so you're going to have to convert that grade and give it back to them. And until they're satisfied that the conversion actually matches or makes sense, that might be something that kind of holds them out on giving you an offer or even changing the offer to conditional. Now, one thing I would tell you, little secret, you do not, I've never done any of these English tests ever. Not for my undergrad, not for the 2 years that I studied law, simply because I have requested for them to waive that requirement or make their own assessments, mainly because I speak English very well and I can write and I am very literate and fluent. But also these tests are very expensive. So this is another set of costs. I told you in the previous videos that, you know, you need to be looking out for a random cost that will pop up. This is another set of costs that might pop up because you need to undertake it, especially if you're from a country where the first language is not English, or it's not in any of the top languages at all. They might definitely require you to do so, unless you are from that country but have studied in other only English speaking institutions. So what I did was I would always email my school or email whatever program that I wanted to undertake that would need that requirement, and just tell them, so this is something that you can do. I'm giving you all of my secrets. I usually frame an email. This is my name, yada yada yada. I applied for this program. I have been in English institutions my entire life, from primary school up into the undergraduate level. I have only studied in English-speaking institutions. I am very literate and fluent in English. All my assessments have been in English, yada yada yada. You can just give them a little spiel about your academic career, and that is usually enough. Back it up, obviously, with your transcripts, your grades, any form of official documentation to prove these points, and you're usually good to go. That's usually sufficient enough, an assessment for some institutions. They might make you take a quiz or something of that sort, just to verify for themselves, but you do not need to be paying any extra money for these aptitude tests if you absolutely do not need to. So again, that's something I always put in there. One of Ghana's top languages is English, yada yada yada, and that's usually good However, if you do need to take any of these tests, the IELTS in the UK is about £195, and TOEFL is about, I think it ranges from about £130 to around 205, depending on what you need to take and certain requirements for even taking the test itself. If you have to take these tests, obviously you have to make sure that you plan in advance. If you think that this might be a requirement of you, I would say that you should reach out to the schools now just to see what your status might be, so that you're doing this even in advance of hearing back from the schools on whether you haven't. Well, obviously, you don't want to start this and pay money if you don't have an offer. But once you have an offer, you need to give yourself enough time to undertake all of these tests and all of that. So definitely, if you're interested in schools, GDL providers, I would say that you should start to email them and reach out now if you're unsure of your status or what might be required of you in terms of this English requirement. Just get it out of the way. Test centers are operating a bit differently now due to the pandemic, so it's not going to be as easy to just book, and it's never, even previously before the pandemic, it was not easy to just book dates. There's very specific dates, they're very tight and specific schedules, so you can only imagine what that's like now. I'm hoping that having to do it online possibly makes it a much smoother process, but that is not promised, so I would say get on top of that now. Into the nitty-gritty of the application. As I said before, it's okay to start off with a conditional offer, but at some point it's going to have to be unconditional, because that's really one of the main requirements of even getting in the first place. Makes perfect sense, does not need to be explained. So main requirement, unconditional offer to be able to complete the application. Then you're going to need your maintenance fees and tuition fees in your account, and then you need to take a tuberculosis test, a TB test, and you need that certificate. And then you're going to need your CAS statement to complete your application. So unconditional offer done out the window. Maintenance fees and tuition. When you're studying in the UK, you have your tuition fees. In my experience, I don't know many countries that do this when needing or requiring of international students to apply for visas, but in Canada's case, this is not something you need to necessarily prove to the T in the same way that you do with the UK. You need to have in your account, let's start with you need to have in your account the full amount of your tuition plus what they call in the UK maintenance fees. So maintenance fees is calculated by the government and maybe adjusted by your uni depending on the term, your program, where they're located. So location also plays a big role and all of that. But basically it's an amount that has been calculated to encapsulate all of the expenses that the government feels that the typical student would incur living in London. So it includes transportation, food, disposable income, all of that. Nobody knows exactly where the figures come from, but they choose a figure for you, and so you have to have that full amount for a year, also in addition to your tuition, in your account for 30 full days, so that you can generate your bank statement to show that you have been able to keep, or you actually have and can afford studying and living in London. So the maintenance fees are in the thousands of pounds. So I think the last one I remember was like £1,200, £1,300 per month is what the maintenance fees dictated by the government plus schools is sitting at, or was sitting at least. So you will have that information when your school gives you the offer. They'll give you an entire guidance, thankfully, on what these costs are and how to start calculating them and all of that. So let's say it sits at £1,200 per month. That is steep. That is what the government believes everyone should have a month, but that also, I guess, includes rent and a few other things. So again, something you need to be aware of, something you need to be planning for. It's money that's sitting there that nobody can use, and we all have things to pay for, things to buy, things to do, things to build. So it is something to consider and plan in advance for, because that means you need to make sure that you have other resources, sources of income that you can rely on while you just wait it out. So yeah, that is the tuition plus maintenance fees met. You now need to take a tuberculosis test. Not everyone needs a TB test. There is a list of countries which the UK government requires to take the test before, as part of their visa application. You cannot submit your visa application without it. Absolutely not. If you are from one of those countries, you're going to have to take the TB test. There are designated test centers in different countries to do this, and you have to go to one that is designated. They have the certificate, they have the stamp, they have everything to verify that you did come to them and not to anyone else. So just do that. If you are from a country that TB test is required of, but you've resided in a country for I think 6 months or more, in a country that TB test is not required of. So let's say in the UK you don't need it. If I'm a citizen of Ghana, I'm Ghanaian, it says on my passport and everywhere, but if I've been in the UK at least 6 months and over prior to making my visa application, I don't need to take the TB test. If I've been in, I think Germany is fine as well. If I've been in Germany for 6 months and over, even though I'm not from Germany, I do not need to take the TB test. So you need to make sure you check those details and see if you're required to do that. If you do have to take the TB test, that's another cost you have to be prepared for. So it's about 125 max pounds, about 150 US dollars. So that's another thing that you need to make account for when applying, going through this entire process. This is not, we haven't even gotten to the actual visa cost yet, but that's also okay. Another thing you will need to complete your application. Actually, let me double back to the tuition and maintenance fees. Now, if you are having your education funded by your parents, that's also possible. So this money does not need to be in your personal account. It can be in your parents' account. What you would then need to do when you're submitting your application is add to your supporting documents. So your supporting documents are going to be your TB certificate and a bunch of other things which I'll list. But one of them will be a letter from your parents, whichever one of them the account belongs to, authorizing you to use the money in the account for your education. So they will need to identify themselves as your parent, you as their daughter or son, and just basically say, I authorized my child Ngozi Chiamaka something to use the money in my account to pay for her tuition. She is studying at, or to pay for her study at City University of London for the GDL program lasting from to and then your parents will have to sign it. So this, you will need an original document signed and scanned, and you can deliver copies or the original, but it needs to be signed by your parents. Along with that, what I would advise is that you will have to add a birth certificate to identify you and the parent as well. So please, if you have never seen your birth certificate before, today is the day to go and find it and see it for the first time, because you will need that. So you scan your birth certificate as well. You don't need the original of that for sure, but make sure that it just identifies your father or your mother as your father or your mother. If it's adoption papers, then you need to scan those as well. If they're your guardian, that needs to be made clear as well. So it could be anyone, but you need documents establishing that relationship and authorizing the use of those funds. One thing else you can add with that is even in addition to the birth certificate and the authorization letter, you can get IDs of your parents. So it can be their driving license, their passports. Because your passport is being submitted, they'll see the correspondence to name. However, if you have different names for your parents, that's another legal barrier that you need to overcome. So you need documentation just showing why. So let's say, wow, this is a whole scenario. So let's say your parents are separated, and it's real life scenarios. People go through this. So let's say you're separated. Your parents is separated, I should say, and you've taken one parent's name over the other, but it's the other one's name that you don't have that's authorizing your funds. You just want to, make it clear that this is your mother. So you probably attach a letter from your mom saying, yes, I'm the mother, she's the daughter of this person, she's taking my name, IDs of your mom, IDs of your dad, authorization letter, birth certificate, boom. But this is in case that the last names are just so unrecognizable. But just from the birth certificate, it should be fine. But you want the point of your doing the application, and even me doing this video, is to make sure that your application is airtight. That should be your goal from the beginning, because once you submit the application, it is gone. You can make no corrections. UK government is not going to come and chase you and find you and ask you why you left this piece of information out. They will simply return your documents to you with a rejection. So your application must be absolutely airtight. Airtight. No errors, no whatever documents. The more supporting documents, in my opinion, the better. So yes, and then the last thing you would need, so coming back to the point I wanted to make before I doubled back, is that you need your CAS statement to be able to complete your application. So what the CAS statement is, CAS, it is a confirmation of acceptance of studies document that is generated by your university. So in that document, basically what you will have is at the point where they decided to give you an unconditional offer, they will generate this document. Sometimes you might need, my first year of study in the UK, they just generated the document and gave it to me. But I think they may have noticed a trend of people making some silly mistakes in their applications. So what City University at least did was they generated an extra layer of the guides that they give you. So they give you a whole form, a whole guide. It was absolutely helpful, absolutely great. Pinpoints you to different sections of the application and how to fill it. So some universities, some GDL providers and BPT providers will have that. But just in case they don't, you do have the UK government site and all of the guides on there as well. But in addition to just having the PDF guide, what City did was added a video explaining the process as briefly as they could, and then they had a quiz, a test at the end of that, and you had to pass a certain threshold to show that you understood what the process actually required before your CAS statement was generated, and you have like three tries to get it right. So I found that even more helpful, even though I'd been through the process before, just in case I did it, I did not want to miss any details. But then because it became a requirement to me actually attaining my CAS statement, it made me all the more attentive to detail. So that is to say that you need to be attentive, and you will get a CAS statement to help you complete your application. The application asks particular questions about your institution. In your CAS statement, your institution or your university is identified as your sponsor. So this is not that they're sponsoring your education, but they're the sponsor in that they're taking you into their institution. So we'll have each sponsor in the UK has like a number that you need to enter into the application. It has a couple more details, the name of the university, the time of study. When you get an offer, you usually get a very general date and timeline of when your studies are. So you get a full year March to this, but in the CAS statement it will tell you exactly the date class start and exactly the last day of your program and the last day or the very last day that your visa lasts still. So you have specific dates. You will have 18 September this instead of just September 2020. You'll have 18 September and May something 2021, whereas before you just have September 21 and summer 2021. There's a lot of other things in that you will need for your application. So it's a very important document. If you don't attain it, you cannot complete the application, which means you're pretty much going nowhere. But do pay attention to detail through your through your preparations as to the details that need to be included. Again, you can start a little early, but the application will stop you so far as you don't have this information. Also included in the CAS statement is your full tuition and maintenance fees. And if you have made a deposit, as most universities will require you to do at some point in time, if you have made a deposit for your fees, that is going to be reflected in the CAS statement, and you will be adding the CAS statement to your application as part of your document when you submit it in person. So if you made any kind of deposits, or you paid your first terms or your full tuition fees, it will be reflected in the CAS statement. That is not to say that automatically secures the visa for you, but it shows your commitment to your studies, and that's usually it has persuasive value, let me say that. One thing though, again, to go back to the accounts part, I could not emphasize tuition and maintenance fees and having it in the bank account for 30 days enough. Now what you cannot do is say, I put this money there, you can see all the money is there, but then before the expiration of the 30-day period, I took money out of that to pay for my deposit. So because it goes to my fees and all, even if it's less than the full amount I should have, it's still the same thing. That would not be accepted. That amount remains untouched. So if you plan to make a deposit, either you wait for that period to expire and then make the deposit because you would generate the bank statements for that period, or you attain funds from somewhere else to make your deposits or pay for your first term or your whole year of fees. Obviously, paying for your whole year of fees when you have money sitting somewhere, if you can, yes. If not, it's a bit ridiculous for anyone to expect of you. So waiting is fine to just do that. Again, you need to start these things early so you give yourself enough of a period of time to actually get everything in. So once you have done completed your online application, put in all the necessary details, you get to the end before you can book your appointment and pay for your visa fees. There's another fee included, which is the immigration health surcharge. So that's basically the amount you're paying in advance of using the NHS services in the UK. So yeah, that's another amount just to look out for. The calculation of that is also very technical, and the information for those things will be included in your guides by university and on the Gov.uk website, which I will link all of these. It sits somewhere around £200, maybe a little less, 150. But I only have the full total amount of everything in my mind. I don't have the singular breakdowns in my mind right now. But that's another cost that will be factored into your visa application. Now, for the entirety of the application process, once you've done that, booked your appointment, you will need to book an appointment. So you have the online application, and then you have the in-person submission. You will need to choose a visa center. So based on where you're doing your application from, you would have made that clear at the beginning of the application, and they would pull up the nearest visa centers to you. I know there are some regions, also especially on the African continent, that have visa centers in particular places. So East African countries, I think, have particular visa centers in, let's say, Rwanda, as opposed to in Kenya, and everyone in that region is meant to go to Rwanda, or vice versa. So just make sure that you know where your visa centers are seated at, because another cost that you might have to incur is travel costs of getting to the visa center and actually submitting your application. So you get to the visa center, you book your time, you submit your application. They take copies of everything. Usually they'll take copies of all your documents, and then they will give you that which you've brought back, take your passport, give you tags, and one more stage. So online application, in-person submission, and then there's an in-person interview. So in person, I mean by you being there, but not necessarily another person. So you will have an interview. These are usually, at least for me, have been Skype interviews. They're usually going to be Skype interviews because the people interviewing you are UK officials. So what happens is, when it's your turn to be interviewed, you get taken to the interview space, the interview room. You wait for them to dial in the official, and then you and the official just basically have an interview. It doesn't last any more than, if your interview even reaches up to 10 minutes, I'd personally be surprised. Then definitely will not be longer than that, unless you're communicating in a different way. Maybe if you're using different devices or you're using aids to communicate, then the interview process might be a little longer. But other than that, it shouldn't be too long. Do not be nervous. They're not interrogating you entirely, but I would say be prepared. At the end of the day, you're going on this journey because you have a reason and because you have a goal, and that needs to be clearly communicated in the interview, because they will ask you a very simple question like, why are you taking this course? Why not any other course? Why are you coming to the UK? Not specifically why you come to the UK, but definitely why are you pursuing this course. They will ask you details about the university you've applied to, how long your program is. So again, all the details that should be ingrained into your brain is what you will need to regurgitate. If you miss any questions, that means you did not go through this process, fully involved in it, someone else did your application, which would be a red flag for them immediately. They're trying to get straight to the point, and they're very, the officials are very straight to the point. They're very, strict will probably be the word, but they're not looking for you to necessarily beat about the bush and wow them. This is not a job interview, so you're not going to all that wow factor and the laugh and like building conversation. You will not have time to build rapport in that sense. That's the sense in which it's straight to the point. There's no rapport building. They're not asking you about where you've lived and all of that. So make sure that you know the details of your university, your program, and you will know this because by the time you've completed the application, any question that you wouldn't have been able to answer before should be answered by your CAS statement. And again, you can just message your legal department or law study school at your university. So name of institution, length of study, maybe know the specific modules which I've covered in other videos, and yeah, just relax. Tell them what you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it, you know where you're going, you know what is in your document pack, what you submitted, you're well aware of all of it. They will also have in front of them, I believe, your application, at least your casting. They will have some documentation showing them what you've applied for and all of that. So they want to verify that. So they won't be asking you questions that they don't actually already know the answers to, if you understand me. Once you submit the online application, they have that as well. So they have all of the details in there. So they're expecting you to verify what has been said or what you've already submitted in your application. The basis on which they offer the scholarships are not uniform amongst ends. Some do a means-based test, and some do a merit-based test for giving you your scholarships. So it would depend, but again, the cap, at least for GDL as it stands, is at 13,000